Welcome to the cheating channel. Andrew and Courtney Simpson, though childless, had happily been married for 10 years. Both wanted children but decided to wait until they had established their careers and could financially support a family on a single income. Both were in their 30s and successful lawyers. Drew specialized in litigation, while Court focused on contract law at a prominent local firm in their hometown. Eventually, they reached a level of financial stability that allowed them to attend their first national convention of the American Bar Association. It was something they had both long anticipated. During the lengthy drive to the hotel near the headquarters, where they had booked a room for the event, their primary conversation centered around starting a family. Both agreed that the time had come, but Courtney confessed to feeling apprehensive about the prospect. It was at the Wednesday evening reception hosted by the Bar Association that things began to go awry. The evening started well enough, they both enjoyed the atmosphere and mingling with fellow barristers, a category of lawyers in the UK and Commonwealth countries. Later in the evening, after the formal part of the reception ended and people started drinking more, dancing and talking loudly, Drew noticed that Courtney was in a playful mood. This wasn't necessarily a bad thing, as it often led to marathon lovemaking at the end of the night. Courtney was a beautiful woman with a lively personality, though somewhat eccentric, and she always flirted. Tonight was no exception. Drew, on the other hand, was quieter and more reserved, a trait unusual for a trial lawyer. Typically, trial attorneys are extremely outgoing, sometimes even to the point of being overbearing. At social gatherings, Drew usually faded into the background. However, he enjoyed observing people and their interactions. If someone initiated a conversation with him, Drew would immediately become an active participant, though he rarely started conversations with strangers himself. While his wife ordered her fourth mojito of the evening, Drew ran his hand along the inside of her stocking-clad thigh, moving closer to her most intimate spot and feeling her warmth against his fingertips. Throughout the evening, he had spent far too much time on the dance floor with various partners and was eagerly anticipating their return to their hotel room. When Drew finally got to what he often referred to as his kitten, he realized that the black thong she had been wearing when they got dressed together was now gone. His eyes lit up as he locked gazes with her deep green eyes. Her gaze was smoky and filled with sensuality, and he was ready to take her right there in the club. She leaned forward, showcasing her thighs and ample chest. Letting out a quiet, appreciative murmur, she purred softly. "Tonight, I want to have some fun, darling," she said without breaking eye contact. "I see. I want that too, baby. Let's go back to the room. Take a look around, Drew, darling. We've never been to this city before. Do you see anyone here we know from back home?" Drew instinctively glanced around. "No, I don't think so. Why? Tonight, I want to have some fun," she said, placing an unmistakable emphasis on the word I. He was stunned. There was no doubt in his mind what she meant. Though deeply shaken and hurt, his instincts as a practicing trial lawyer told him not to show his true emotions. In criminal cases, lawyers like to think they play a bigger role than they actually do. Most of the time, jurors focus on the evidence rather than the attorneys. However, in tort law, the body of law governing obligations arising from causing harm, things are far more subjective. Jurors tend to get bored, the evidence is more tedious and open to interpretation, or it's so complex that even the attorney presenting the arguments might struggle to fully grasp it. Because of this, jurors pay much closer attention to how a case is presented. The last thing any tort lawyer wants is for the jurors to feel that they are shocked or even slightly surprised by the proceedings. Such a reaction could have a significant impact on the outcome, if not the verdict itself. Drew couldn't figure out where this was coming from. The only potential red flag he could think of was his wife's reluctance to start a family. However, on the drive here, she had agreed to do exactly that. "I see. But what about our relationship?" She ignored his question. Although she wasn't a trial lawyer, she knew how to interrogate witnesses and understood that she couldn't let her opponent distract her. She sighed, still pressing his hand tightly against her body. "Have I been a good wife? In our 15 years together, have you ever had any reason to doubt my love and complete devotion to you? From the moment we became exclusive in our freshman year, name one instance, one event, one situation, anything. I know I flirt, But have you ever doubted me, even when you saw me do it? It might have seemed like she'd made one of the simplest rookie mistakes a lawyer could make, asking a question without knowing the answer. But that wasn't the case. She knew the answer. No, that's not true. I've never doubted your commitment to our relationship, until about 30 seconds ago. Why now? He resigned himself to the inevitable. It was remarkable how quiet it seemed in the center of a nightclub filled with flashing lights, pounding music that reverberated through the chest, a DJ shouting about anything and everything, and more than 200 intoxicated lawyers. They spoke in normal tones, yet neither missed a single syllable of what the other said. I already told you that I'm ready to start our family. I just want these weekends for myself. I deserve this. On Monday, I'll throw away my birth control pills and dedicate myself to our future. She pushed his hand away, leaned back in her chair, and crossed her arms, further emphasizing her ample neckline and making it clear, in her opinion, that the conversation was over. I see. Have you already chosen someone? He already knew the answer to his question. Yes, she replied softly but firmly. All right, let me ask you one more question. What's the compensation you're willing to pay? Compensation? Don't play dumb. You're a contract lawyer, you know what compensation means. What are you offering me as compensation? What price are you willing to pay? He was on the verge of losing control. He couldn't comprehend how quickly his life was unraveling. Darling, the only price is your ego. I know that by doing this, I'll hurt you, and I'll spend the next 30 years trying to heal that pain. This has nothing to do with what we have. It's Wednesday evening, and we don't have to check out of the hotel until Saturday morning. I'll return to our room on Friday night, and we'll start practicing making babies. Everything will be fine. It was over. 15 years together, 10 years of marriage. A family they would never have. No children's parties, no birthdays, no first days of school, no graduations, no daughters to give away, no grandchildren bouncing on their knees. Drew wasn't sure how he managed to get back to the hotel room. He vaguely remembered someone asking if he was okay while he was riding the elevator, but his mind was in turmoil, and he was still in a mild state of shock from what had happened. Everything felt surreal to him. One moment, he had been fantasizing about an incredible night of intimacy with Court, and the next, his marriage was over. He didn't know how long he sat on the edge of the bed, staring blankly at the wall, but eventually, a plan began to form in his mind. He knew what he needed to do and forced himself to move forward. The drive home was only 3.5 hours, but Drew knew he had a couple of days to get everything done. He understood that, for Courtney, he didn't exist for the next 48 hours. That was enough time to do what needed to be done. He realized that the first thing he needed to do in the morning was report their joint credit cards as stolen. If he was lucky, some hotel maid might find the purse Court had left in the room and take it without reporting it. Drew had no intention of touching the belongings his soon-to-ex-wife had left behind in the room. He also figured that if the maid took her purse, it would at least buy him until the end of Monday to leave. The divorce itself would be simple and clean. They lived in a no-fault state. No kids, no house, no shared assets. They had always kept their finances separate and contributed equally to expenses. They earned roughly the same income, so the divorce was the easy part. The hard part was starting over. Drew quickly packed his suitcase and was ready to walk out the door. For a moment, he hesitated, wondering if he should leave her a note, but then decided against it. He stepped into the hallway and headed toward the elevator. The sound of the automatic door closer shutting the hotel room door echoed through the corridor, marking the end of his previous life. On his way to the lobby, a thought crossed his mind, and he stopped by the front desk to check out. My wife is taking the car. We have an urgent matter at home and need to check out immediately. We left the keys in the room. He watched as the clerk pressed a few keys, and he knew the cards were deactivated. Stepping outside, he allowed himself a small smile, knowing how much trouble Court would face in a couple of days. Screw her anyway. 7 years later, Drew was sitting in a hotel restaurant, sipping iced tea while waiting for his food to arrive. He needed to eat quickly before heading to the seminar. He genuinely found the seminar interesting and knew it would be a valuable experience to help him in his family law practice. He noticed that the newspaper left on the worn vinyl seat of the booth displayed had been almost 7 years to the day since his divorce was finalized. Wow, time flies. At first, he didn't realize he had said it out loud. Slightly embarrassed, he glanced around to see if anyone had overheard him. It had been a long time since he had thought about court. Although his divorce had been relatively simple, he came to understand just how unfair the so-called no-fault system could be to the injured party. Frankly, the system existed because some people couldn't handle their own mess, they acted like children, tried to harm the other party, and the system had to step in and sort everything out for them. These were the cases where the old adage, "nobody wins in a divorce," truly rang true. In any case, it served as motivation for Drew to switch his specialization to family law. As he discovered, most divorces these days happen simply because both parties gave up. There wasn't much conflict, and both sides wanted to end things as quickly and painlessly as possible. He took on any case that came his way, much like you take on your clients when they walk through the door. However, he particularly enjoyed dealing with the relatively rare cases involving infidelity, especially when he suspected that his client's spouse was trying to tighten the screws on them. His thoughts were abruptly interrupted by a voice he still recognized. "Hi, Drew. How are you?" He looked up, and to his surprise, there she was. He couldn't have been more shocked if someone had hit him with a cattle prod. "Hi, Court. Believe it or not, I was just thinking about you. What are you doing at a family law conference?" "I'm not attending the conference. I'm here for something else. May I sit down?" "Of course, sorry." He gestured for her to sit. "I'm really stunned to see you, so forgive my manners." "Wow, I don't even know what to say." She sat up straight and spoke in an irritated tone. "You didn't even talk to me, Drew. You ignored every attempt I made to contact you. You didn't say a word to anyone in my family, including my mom, who, as you know, loved you dearly. You didn't even show up at a single hearing. You just vanished. There was nothing to say, Court. Nothing to say. 15 years together, and you couldn't even say, go to hell before you left." That Monday night, I walked up to our porch and was served divorce papers before I even stepped through the door. And when I finally got inside, there wasn't a single thing left to remind me of you or our marriage. "I see. So you destroyed our marriage in an instant with an incredibly selfish act. And I'm the bad guy. If that's all you've got to say, just leave and let me be." "Drew, I'm sorry. Just get the hell out of here, Court, right now," he barked, his face flushed with rage. Most of the restaurant was now staring at them. She stood up, tears in her eyes, and walked away. At that moment, a whirlwind descended upon Drew. It was the Chatterbox twins and their younger sister, all barreling toward him at full speed as usual. His wife was right behind them. She was laughing and smiling, but her expression quickly changed when she saw his face. Her gaze darted to the rapidly retreating figure of Court leaving the restaurant lobby. "That was her, wasn't it, Drew?" He just nodded, too busy wrangling his 3 children. Without another word, his wife, Celia, swiftly followed Court. Drew watched as Celia caught up with her. They started talking, and after a while, Celia motioned for Court to sit down. The conversation seemed to last 10 minutes or more. It looked like they exchanged contact information, and then Celia hugged Court before they parted ways. Celia returned to the table and took their youngest daughter from Drew, giving him a chance to manage the twins. Drew's eyes widened, and his jaw dropped when Celia sat back down. "In a couple of weeks, she'll come to our house and you two are going to talk. Really talk, Drew. Don't say anything, just nod if you understand." Her tone left no room for argument. So he simply nodded and turned his attention to the 2 little monsters on his lap, who were now his entire world. Later that evening in their hotel room, after the 3 musketeers were sound asleep, Celia looked at him and asked, "Don't you have anything you want to say or ask her, baby?" He took a deep breath and replied softly, "For the first few years I did, but I guess my pride wouldn't let me. But now? No, I have nothing to say, and I'm glad I didn't give her the chance back then." "What? You're kidding, right? You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious, Celia. If I'd let her talk to me back then, maybe she would have said something that made me change my mind. But if that had happened, I would have never met you, and our 3 girls wouldn't exist. No, I don't need to talk to her, and I have no regrets." She wrapped her arms around him and showered him with kisses. You sure know what to say to a girl, don't you, baby? But that poor woman needs to talk to you, so the least you can do is sit down and listen. I'll do it, but what's the point? All she's going to do is say how sorry she is. If I ask her why, she'll say she doesn't know and so on. But I'll do it for you, and maybe it'll help her find closure. By the way, what the hell is closure anyway? Drew, be kinder. Maybe I can't give you a definition, but if you truly didn't care about her, would you have yelled at her just a couple of minutes after seeing her for the first time in 7 years? Maybe that's what closure is all about. Maybe you're right, but even putting you and the girls aside, I realized long before meeting you that my life was better without her. The divorce forced me to reevaluate my life and what really mattered to me. Sure, I went through the usual emotional turmoil that most people experience when a marriage falls apart. But that failure made me take a hard look at myself, something I never would have done if she hadn't acted so foolishly. Drew paused to gather his thoughts and catch his breath. They say the greatest successes often come after the biggest failures, and I firmly believe that's true in my case. I'm much happier practicing family law now than I ever was working in tort law. Sometimes I feel like I'm actually helping people. Sure, I don't make as much money, I don't drive a Beamer, and I don't live in a lakeside apartment. But I'm happier than I've ever been. And what about her? Maybe you should ask her those questions yourself. What's the point, Celia? I don't regret where I am now, not one bit. He paused, and a deeply sad expression crossed his face. His voice grew almost inaudible as he continued, actually, that's not true. I do have one regret. I should have talked to her mother. She's such a kind woman. I know she cared about me, and I liked her too. When I lost both my parents, she became family to me. And I left without saying a word to her. Celia had nothing more to say. She had hoped the conversation would benefit Drew as much as it might help Cork. But now she doubted whether it was the right thing to do. Was she forcing Drew into something that would only reopen old wounds he no longer cared about? And could she stop it now? As it turned out, Celia didn't need to do anything. The meeting never happened. On the night before Courtney was supposed to arrive in town, Celia's phone rang after midnight. She always dreaded late-night calls, fearing bad news, but she instinctively answered. On the other end was a clearly distraught woman. Celia? It's Angela Jones, Courtney's mother. I need to speak with Andrew. The ringing phone had woken Drew, and Celia handed it to him. It's for you. Drew took the phone. Yes. Andrew, it's Angela. Courtney took her own life yesterday afternoon. The statement was followed by the heart-wrenching sobs of someone experiencing unbearable pain. I'm so sorry, Mom. I don't know what to say. Oh God, this is my fault. Tears streamed down Drew's face, but he couldn't find the words. Celia, who had heard everything, held her husband tightly and openly wept, thinking she was somehow to blame as well. Andrew, this isn't your fault. She had so many problems, and she brought them on herself. There's a lot about her after the divorce that you don't know. She left a sealed letter for you. I hid it from the police. No one knows it exists except you and me. What do you want me to do with it, sweetheart? Just hold on to it for now and let me think about it. Can you do that for me? Of course, sweetheart. Andrew, I need you with me. Can you come? I'll come as soon as I can, Mom. I'm bringing my whole family. I want you to meet them. I know you'll love them. I'll call you back tomorrow and we'll plan everything. Is someone with you right now? You shouldn't be alone. Yes, sweetheart, my friend Joyce is here with me. I can't wait to meet your family. We'll talk tomorrow, and the call ended. A private memorial service for Courtney was held 7 days later on a cold but clear autumn day. As promised, Drew and his family were there. Only a few family friends attended. It seemed that, despite being a highly competent lawyer, Courtney had no real friends. She was cremated, and her ashes were to be scattered in the park where she and Drew often walked when they were dating. Angela said it was the happiest time in Courtney's life. Losing her daughter to suicide was an almost unbearable burden for Angela. But she quickly grew to love Celia and especially the 3 girls. By the end of the week, the girls had started calling her Grandma Angie. Angela shared what had happened in Courtney's life after Drew left. He was shocked by the revelations of reckless behavior, substance abuse, and mental health struggles that followed the divorce. She even explained why Courtney ended up at the same hotel as Drew. She had disappeared with two men she met at a nightclub and had been gone for over a week. When she returned, she was bruised. According to Angela, this wasn't unusual. Courtney was also on the verge of losing her partnership. Drew was stunned by how one poor decision, made at the worst possible moment, had sent Courtney's life spiraling out of control. It would take him a long time to come to terms with it. The evening before Drew's family was set to return home, he and Celia had a long conversation and came to several decisions. The next morning, Drew pulled Angela aside while Celia kept the girls occupied. "Mom, we need to talk about a few things. First, Celia and I would like to invite you to come live with us. There's nothing tying you to this place anymore. You don't have to decide right away, but we'd love for you to seriously consider it. We'd all be thrilled to have you with us. If you decide to come, we'll help you every step of the way with the move. We'd also like to be with you when you scatter her ashes. Please think about it, okay?" "Oh, sweetheart, that's so kind of you. I promise I'll give it careful thought. But I'm going to miss her so much." She became upset again. Drew held her close, trying to comfort her as she worked to regain her composure. Once she calmed down, he continued, "We need to talk about the letter. I think the best thing for us to do is take it and throw it into the fireplace without ever opening it. That letter is for you, Andrew. I know, but I have no intention of reading it. If you give it to me, I'll burn it. But I want to give you the option to keep it. I don't know about you, but I want my memories of court to stay as they were before the divorce. Your memories should be of that time too. And I worry that reading the letter will leave us remembering only what happened after the divorce. I don't want anything to do with that damned letter. I'm leaving it with you. If you decide to read it, the only thing I'll ask is this: never, and I mean never, mention to me what it says." Angela was shocked by his response, but began to understand Drew's reasoning. She desperately wanted to remember her daughter as she was before the actions that destroyed her marriage. Maybe the letter contained genuine remorse and an acknowledgement of how destructive her decisions had been. But what if it held only more pain? Drew had told her about his brief encounter with Court a few weeks ago. What if the letter was filled with anger, blaming Drew even further? Courtney hadn't been in a good state of mind, especially after seeing Drew. Angela felt torn. Before they headed home, Celia also had a private conversation with Angela. Please move in with us. We would love for you to be a part of our family's life. I don't think you realize how much you mean to Drew. I promise, sweetheart, I'll think about it. It would be wonderful to be around young people again," Angela replied wistfully. As Drew and his family left for home, they said their goodbyes with tears and hugs, pleading with Angela to come with them. After they left, Angela collapsed into the armchair in her living room, across from the fireplace. She pulled the letter out of the pocket of her dress and stared at it. She knew she had a decision to make.